Welcome back to another recap of my chess tournament that I played last week in Sardinia, Italy. I have the black pieces against a 2000 rated person from Iran, and e4 is started on the board. I go with e5, knight at bishop c4. My opponent actually surprised me, as I am surprised right now. Bishop c4 is the bishop's opening, much more rare than the typical knight f3. So bishop c4 was played, and I did have some preparation, thankfully, because I had lost a game to the white pieces who played this in Germany to now my friend and commentator Max, who played the Vienna against me and started with bishop c4. So I had some prep here. Knight f6, d3, although my opponent is a completely anonymous person. He had 0 games in the repertoire. As a 2000 ELO FIDE rated player, this is unheard of. He had 1 game in the database with the black pieces. It was absolutely useless to my prep. So I didn't have any prep here. d3 is played, I go c6, and I'm thankful that I saw this, I reviewed this before the tournament, because now I am saved. After d5, the bishop goes back, and I go bishop d6. And from this position, only in 4 moves, I will be winning. Queen e2 is played. This is the first dubious move, I would say. White should just castle or go knight c3. Knight c3, there's a nice trick here. You can go castles, and if your opponent thinks that they have won a juicy pawn on d5, you can meet this with a nice fork with queen a5 check. A nice little opening trap, perhaps for blitz players. Queen e2, I go castles, and now knight d2. Now, as you've seen, the king is still in the center, but I have finished my kingside development. My pieces are developed, my king is castled, and my rook is already prepared to go on this E line and devastate the white pieces. So black has a small edge because of this factor. Now I go knight a6. My idea is simple. I want to go to c5 and then to take that bishop pair for myself. c3 is played. My opponent wants to meet knight c5 by tucking his bishop to c2. So that's what happens. I go knight c5, bishop c2. And so now I already have a small edge after 9 moves. Small edge, if you put it on a very strong engine, like a blue engine, it will say that I'm already -1, so a full pawn up, which is crazy. All I have to do is play b6, says the engine on depth 29. Or knight e6 is also good. I took on e4 and actually got an advantage. I played b6 and threatened bishop a6 here to razor through the queen and potentially the rook that will end up on f1 from castling. So my opponent tries to prevent this, takes off my knight from the protection of the a6 square, and now I go with bishop a6 anyways, attacking the queen first. A more valuable piece is attacked. You must respond to that first. And here, my opponent is actually completely fine, and I was only calculating this move by my opponent. Knight c4, it looks really nice. Here you're blocking the pin. Actually, it doesn't look nice. This is why my opponent did not consider it. But on knight c4, there is a pin, but at the same time, my knight is now attacked, so I need to move it. So if I go, let's say knight e6, which is what I had prepared, now you can just play castles, let's say, and here it's very hard for me to attack this weakness on the pin, and white is going to go bishop d3 next move. Even bishop d3 here is very nice, just taking off from the pin and attacking my bishop. My bishop goes back, and now I'm compromising a pawn on e5. So I would actually have to give a bishop pair, and this is like going downhill. But now my opponent makes a big mistake. He plays c4, and now my knight is attacked, but I have a completely winning move. And if you put this on a smart, very strong engine, it's already -1.5 for the black pieces. After 12 moves, it's heroic. It's one of the hardest moves to find in chess. And these aren't my words, these are the words of Vasily Ivanchuk, who says, the knight backwards is one of the hardest tactics to spot in chess because it's an unnatural move to the human eye. Knight e6, the knight going backwards to redirect itself to f4 and attack this queen at once. Also, I have a discovery attack on this pawn on b4. My opponent can either choose to defend or choose to defend this. Both are ugly. So now my opponent goes b5. And I get really excited because I see a win. I'm like really excited in my mind because I've been suffering in this tournament. I have 0 out of 3 first games. I lost my 3 first games of this tournament. I thought this was going to be my breakout tournament. But no, I've been met with extreme hardship And here I finally have a crack of hope. My opponent plays b5. I can take this pawn, and after c takes b5, I can go knight f4 attacking this queen. The queen would have to move, right? Optimally to defend this pawn on g2, so queen f1. And now I don't have to defend my bishop. I saw queen c7, because now the c file is open and I'm attacking this bishop on c2. You would take my bishop, and now I go queen takes c2, and it's absolutely over positionally. White is not castling, and black is just winning. I'm coming up to do my move. I calculated it fully. I'm like in it. I know I'm winning, and I go with this absolute stunner, knight f4. And in the title, you see but then. This is the but then. I played knight f4 first, which is a big blunder in terms of move orders. It's really bad, because now the queen goes to defend on f1, and I take this pawn, and my opponent doesn't have to take this pawn now. He can just go g3, attacking my knight, kicking my knight out of the way. And I can't, it's not like I can take here because you take my knight and it's over, I'm down a piece. So I really had to take here first, coming back a few moves, take back, and now knight f4. Queen here, and I've gained that time, that tempo, and now rook c8 is absolutely devastating, and it's over. But no, I played knight f4 first. I realized it probably 2 seconds after I dropped the piece on the board. So queen f1, and I was so angry, so tilted, so pissed at myself. I was really frustrated because I need this win. I need this win more than anything, right? So I take on b5. My opponent plays g3 and attacks my knight first. I have to go back with my knight, and now he takes back. Don't get me wrong, I'm still better, but it's not the line that I saw, so I'm just like out of my calculation. I'm out of my prep of the line that I saw. I don't know if that makes sense. I go bishop b7, folding back my bishop, putting some pressure on e4, and I have a small plus going for me. White still can't castle. This king is still in the center, which means that any attacks against this king are very, very desirable. Notably, bishop b4, knight takes e4 sacrifices, knight coming into d4 and taking back with the queen, attacking the rook. We have a lot of things going for us. So bishop b2, and now it's completely winning if I find rook c8, which I played. It's an attacking move, timing up this bishop, and it's completely winning here for black already after 17 moves. My opponent's best move is to castle here, but I thought queen c7 and it's over. But apparently queen d3 still holds, and now I have to find knight takes e4, insanity. Knight takes, queen takes c2, taking off the queen from defending this knight. After queen takes, rook takes, king takes, I'll take this knight with another fork coming in. This is insane, and I take this with another fork. Wait, this is a crazy line that I have never seen before in my life. And I'm up a piece in the endgame. What? So castles was the best move here, but my opponent played bishop b1, and now I aim to attack this pawn, but I couldn't find anything past knight c5, which is the best move. But it's so frustrating to me how after queen e2, I cannot attack this pawn, and it seems like I have nothing. Black to play and win a piece here, the equivalent of a piece here. Pause the video to solve the problem. Let's see if you can find it. Test yourself or chess yourself. Here, black has knight a4, attacking this bishop. It's so simple. The bishop is actually quite trapped. You can't go to a3 because I take the bishop. You can't go to c1 because I take the bishop. And you can't go to c3 because I take the bishop. You can take here, and this is why I didn't look farther than knight a4. I was like, it just gives a pawn, but there's rook c1, and you're completely winning. So after knight a4, black wins a piece, wins the game almost. Knight c4 is also a doubt, but after knight takes, queen takes b2, we would take this knight, and if knight takes, rook c1 is just completely winning. I did not find this. I found bishop b4. This is the fourth best move in this position, and you can see that eval bar drop a little bit. So bishop b4, I thought that it's just simply winning because bishop c3, I win here for positional reasons. Rook takes c3, I'm threatening rook c1. White really just has to castle, so this line was entirely forced. Bishop c3, you have nothing else than to take here, and now I'm threatening the rook, and now castles, and now I go knight d4. Once again, it's pretty much forced. I'm threatening to take here. No, I'm threatening the queen, and the queen doesn't have good moves. So if the queen goes here, I just have knight takes f3, knight takes f3, and then we trade queens on d1, and I win a piece on f3. So that's not possible. And if queen e1, I just win a piece. So again, for the third move in a row, this is a forced combination, trade, trade. Now I'm threatening rook takes b3, and I'm also threatening things on a1. So my opponent goes a4. Also, this bishop is terrible. I don't have a material compensation, but I have a physical compensation on the board. Here, black is again winning. I missed this combination because it's really hard to find. If you are a very confident chess player or a very strong one, pause the video to solve black to play and win. I will put my light on because I'm in the dark. No, I'm not actually. I'm pretty good. Pretty good. The sunset, there's some sunset left. Here, black has bishop c8, which ends the game immediately. What is the purpose of bishop c8? Here, I want to disconnect the queen from the defense of this knight because my queen is attacking the knight. It's very far-fetched, I know. Also, this queen has very low amounts of squares, so you can try to trap it. So let's say you play anything, h5. Here, bishop g4. The queen has to go to e1, and now rook d8. And this knight is not only trapped, it can't be defended. If rook a2 to defend this, now I have bishop e6, and rook moves rook c8, and it's just positionally over. Like, I don't know how else to say this. The engine says -5, and a deep engine will say more than that. It's crazy. I'm up a rook, but it's completely equal material. This is because I'm coming in with rook c1, and I'm threatening discoveries, and it's actually completely over on the board. If you play something like king g2, bishop g4, and you want to meet this with f3, so now that you're out of the pin, that's why you move the king, here we have bishop e6, which is not even understandable, but it's still completely winning. I think it's the same purpose. You just want to tank this knight that has no squares and is crying in the center of the board. After a4, I am materialistic, and I couldn't get out of this position without material 1. So I have 17 minutes left on move 23, and I go with rook takes g3, check. Checking the king and threatening this rook. So after I win this pawn, my opponent has some compensation, but it is advantage for the black pieces. Knight c4 is played to activate pieces. Now I take. My opponent has two very sharp moves here. You can take a pawn, or you can go for actual aggressive counterattacks with knight d6, and my opponent played the very mature move knight d6, attacking my bishop and making my pieces poor. I have two options here, bishop c8 or bishop a8. One keeps pressure on this e4 square and overall keeps 3 pressure points, so you have good chances to try to win this pawn or actually glue these pieces to this pawn here. And the other one is attempting to redirect the bishop elsewhere on the board. And I played the best move, the only good move here, and it's bishop c8. Here, I want to either play bishop e6 to further sink this bishop in the board. I mean, the bishop on b1 is terrible. That is quite obvious. Or to go bishop b4 and activate my bishop with tempo on the queen. Bishop a2. It's getting pretty scary here. I have to play accurately, and I don't. The best move here is just to play bishop e6, and my full pawn up is now a double isolated pawn on the board. I couldn't go through with this. I'm sorry. And white has a nice knight. I evaluated that this was equal even though I have a pawn up, which is not true. It's the best move. Bishop g4 is what I played, and it looks reasonable. The queen goes to b2, and now I try to trade queens because I want to make my pawn up felt in this endgame. So I go with queen d4, attacking this queen and attacking this knight, and after we trade, I have a passed pawn. Now my opponent's idea and plan in this endgame is to really just put pressure on f7 and perhaps get some material back. So f3 is played, bishop e6. Now that my opponent would trade, if this would happen, I can not only not have double isolated pawns, but I can make a protected passed pawn here on d4 with the move e5. So my opponent went back to b1. This is a fatal mistake because it lets me activate my rook while his pieces are all terrible. e5, defending the knight and attacking mine. I go with knight e8. I want to trade off this very powerful knight for my knight that's medium, and the trade happens. I'm very happy now. because, okay, I have 2 pawns up in this endgame. This one is terrible, so really I have 1 strong pawn up in this endgame. And I need to make this pawn felt by bringing my king to the center of the board and pushing this pawn to the finale, to the finish line. So rook d1 pressuring my pawn, rook d8, and now bishop d3. I go with rook d5, attacking here. I don't have much time, so the technique is medium. f4 defending this pawn, and now I go with g6, trying to play against this f5. I just want to obstruct anything that my opponent wants and just enable my own plans, right? The basis of an endgame. So rook a1, pressuring the weakness, I defend. Rook back to c8, threatening checks and invading. I go with king g7, preventing a check here, but rook c6 still invading. Bishop d5, the best move of the position, attacking this rook, and the rook goes to c8. And now I play a very important move. My king cannot progress past this barbed wire on the board. So I play this very nice f6 here. My plan is either you trade pawns and my king gains some space and time, or I will trade with you and I'll create 2 isolated pawns that are weak. So he takes and I take back, and now rook f8 check. My king is gets defended by this rook on f7, rook h8, and now my plan is simply to flop over to the queen side and get to c3 to push this pawn. A major weakness in this endgame again for my opponent was not moving the king. I remember saying this about another opponent back in Cambridge, if you remember that game recap, in which my opponent the entire endgame did not move his king and got punished greatly out of an endgame that he was better in. King h2, my opponent wants to go like this, but it's the wrong plan, and it's felt immediately after king d6, and my opponent would get met with king h3 with bishop e6 check. And now you can't go up the board. King here, and where is this king going? Like, my king is there first by far. So after king d6, rook check, rook blocks, rook f8, maybe some f5 things, but I don't really care. I play bishop e6 to defend against this king going up, but also I want to reorient my bishop to f5 later on to defend against the piece that's blocking my pawn, and I want to enable my king to go to d5, and this is by playing the bishop out of that square. The rook goes to c8, and now I can trade these bishops off. My opponent refuses the trade, and I go with a rook attack on this bishop. King up, and here actually fascinatingly, after check and bishop here, if my opponent could check me, it would be checkmate, which is kind of some poetry right there for you. It's not check, so the complete opposite result happens, and black is completely winning here. The bishop moves back, threatening checkmate. I go with d3, and here I calculated if the king can stop my king from going to e3 in time. It can, and that's what he does, king d4 and king f2, but there's a small problem. If you choose to play king f2, the rook is hanging, and I just take the rook, and my opponent resigns. And this is my first win out of 4 games in the Sardinia World Chess Festival. I'm suffering, but at least I get a break. I have now 1 out of 4, and my next game is against, who's my next game against? And my next game is against a 15 or 16-year-old kid from Germany who has 2130. And he watched my recaps to prepare against me.